Hello, today I'm talking to Jim Odie, and good afternoon, Jim. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your books.
Thanks, Donna. Yes, so my name's Jim Odie, and I write predominantly psychological thrillers, but I also write young adult and horrors as well, and a number of short stories. I've been writing now since pretty much, I think it was January 2016. So a few years now, getting into the swing of things a little bit more. I've been with two independent publishers, and currently I'm self-publishing for 8 of my 12 books, and 4 of them are across the pond in America, kind of getting lost and forgotten, but hopefully one day I should have those back.
And did you always want to write?
Yeah, I think so. Pretty much ever since I can remember, really. I've always read and I've always liked the idea of different stories and things like that. Back in probably when I was about 6 or 7, I think was when I first wrote a story in a battered old exercise book that was pretty much made up of all the kind of monsters and things that I saw in cartoons and TV programs. So you had your classics of Frankenstein's, Dracula's, werewolves, all that sort of thing, all kind of situated in a large house with hidden corridors and kind of booby traps and all that. And funny enough, my first book, Lost Connections, actually ends up in a large house that has secret corridors and booby traps and things. So I guess I just kind of moved on slightly and made the childish kind of stories more adult.
And what made you finally decide to take the plunge and write to get published?
Well, I wrote a book back in about 97, and I never actually sent it anywhere, so I didn't do anything with that at all. Then my book that I've got, which is called Just South of Heaven, which is with the American publisher, I actually wrote that in about 99, and I did send it off and was kind of speaking to a publisher back then, but at the end they decided not to take it on, and just kind of I stopped writing really from there of actual books. Back in 99, it's a whole different world to what it is now. There wasn't Amazon to be able to publish through. There wasn't the independent publishers that there are today. So it was pretty much you had to go with the big boys and you either made it or you didn't. And I think I just kind of gave up a little bit from there. And I turned my attention to doing other things. So, pretty much from 2000 on was when the likes of the internet and email, things like that came out, where I found it much more entertaining to start sending emails to colleagues and making them laugh and doing things like that. And I kind of got into that as something that was a little bit different. And then I started doing music reviews for a website. And so I ended up doing that for about 10 years. And I could then marry together my love of music with writing and putting a bit more of a comedic spin onto the reviews. So they weren't just boring standard kind of reviews. They were very much, slightly out there. And some people liked them and other people found them a little bit strange, but it gave me something a little bit different, I guess, to focus on. And so I quite enjoyed doing that up until probably about 2010 time. Pretty much when I started, I had one child already, and then the second one came along in 2010. And so my focus from that changed because I was going from just writing about bands I enjoyed and going to gigs and doing reviews and interviewing bands to then just being inundated with loads of reviews to do. And I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was just doing it for the sake of doing it. And I didn't want to go into journalism, musical journalism at all, because it's very much, you have to write what you're told to write. And I got to that stage of it was no longer fun to put a spin on things and start doing things anymore. So then I just carried on, started really writing myself. and until Lost Connections came out, which was about the 5th title that I had of it. I had all these bizarre, abstract, avant-garde type titles that I wanted, you know, for it to sound fancy when you, which is what you do as a writer when you first start out. You start writing and then you start getting a little bit, oh, okay, I'm an author, so I can start having real abstract things, and then I can try and explain my way through them later, and it'll sound really cool. And then people start reading it and they go, what are you on about? Just a decent title that people understand, and you go, yeah, you're right. so that was it pretty much. And I thought, you know what, Amazon was where it was at that point. So there was the platform in order for me to be able to put my books out there. And I didn't really bother trying to go with a publisher. I think I was still half in the mindset of, oh, my stuff isn't good enough. So I've always kind of looked at levels, where I am, where I want to go, and, you know, trying to hit targets. And my first was really, okay, there are other books out there. What I want is for mine to not look amateur. I want it to roughly stand up against other books so people won't think that it's amateurish. Which incidentally, then I put a cover out, which pretty much amateur, if I'm honest now. But you know, you live and learn. You think yourself, oh wow, that's amazing, that's brilliant, that's my book, and then you change it. I changed it within about 6 months or so. And you know, that's just what you do. So each time after Lost Connections, I got straight onto writing another book. I had a short story that was published with Bloodhound Books. And that really gave me a bit more of a confidence because it got my name out there. So then suddenly I had 2 self-published books and a short story. And so, yeah, I just kind of pushed on from there, really.
And how did you deal with Bloodhound?
That was just purely, I think I just saw a post out on one of the website, you know, one of the Facebook groups saying submit a book or submit a short story, and I just wrote it from scratch there and then, just got something out and sent it off. And you know, I still quite like the story. I mean, I read it recently and it wasn't as good as I remembered it being, funny enough, because I'm hopefully either this year or next year I'm going to do an anthology of all of my short stories put together, because they're all spread out in as many anthologies. A lot of them aren't even available anymore. So I wanted to pull them all together so that they're all in one place, because a lot of people, you know, I'm beginning to get some great readers now who have read most of my books, but they've not seen half of the short stories and they can no longer get hold of them anymore. So, you know, it'd be just really nice to pull them all together. So at the moment, I'm trying to pick them out. I don't want to have too many of them because there's, like I say, there's about 15, 16 of them, but I'm probably going to have about 10 or 11 of the best ones I've got. And I'll use my beta readers really for them to say, look, no, you've only got 5 decent ones to just do 5, you know, something like that. Really, that's the idea of the beta readers, really, you know, and that's why they are really invaluable, to looking at your stuff, reading over them before it hits the market, really. So yeah, that's the plan. And yeah, so luckily the story was picked up and kind of went with it from there. And you know, it's a great way to get to know other authors. You know, probably from there I made friends with a lot of Bloodhound authors from there. So you know, and most of those I'm still really good friends with now, which has been brilliant.
Yeah, they seem generally quite short books.
Yeah, no, very much so. So no, it's I know a lot of the authors are, you know, certainly the independent ones, and this, you know, I think we all understand the struggles, the strains, you know, what you're trying to do. You know, sometimes marketing's not our thing at all, advertising's not our thing. Even banging your drum and trying to say, read my books, is not something that comes naturally to a lot of us. You know, we're inherently, you know, inward kind of facing, really. That's not what we want to do. So yeah, ideally I prefer to just sit in a room on my own and just write books and just send them out, and then they got published, and that's it. I didn't have to interact. But you know, life's not like that. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, so you know, interacting with humans isn't something that comes particularly naturally to me. So you know, other than imaginary friends, they're about the only ones that you know, I can interact with, and half of those actually left me for other people. But you know, such is life.
If that says more about you or more about them.
You think? I just think they were picky, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well, you should have sorted it out. They were your imaginary friends.
But they always want to be someone else's, don't they? You know, grass is always greener.
What sort of stuff did you read growing up, and what authors were you drawn to?
So, I mean, people like Enid Blyton, I read loads of her stuff. I guess I was more drawn to Secret Seven as opposed to Famous Five. I think it was that kind of gang looking, you know, at mysteries and solving things, rather than the Famous Five, which were a little bit more of the posh kids that were going off on a jolly a little bit more. I think it's all to do with what you can kind of, you know, what you can relate to, and all things like that. I liked the mystery of series as well, so there was a whole load of those as well, and those were really good. We like those. But you know, I liked people like Roald Dahl as well. I liked Willard Price, his adventure books. That really gave an insight into, you know, looking at kind of mystery stories, but in other countries, you know, and it was all to do with different types of animals. There was all poaching and things like that going on. There's always an underlining moral kind of statement there. I like to think like the Hardy Boys as well. So that's sort of thing. Again, it all fell into the same type of thing where there was a mystery and, you know, something had to be solved. And I mean, I grew up loving Scooby-Doo and still do now. It's that same thing, you know, and yeah, I still use a basis of that in some of my books. It's yeah, it's fundamentally, it's like a black and white kind of stencil that you use to start with and think about, you know, how are you going to do it? How are you doing that? How does it kind of portray out what's the motivation behind what's happening, you know, what's the rewards that people are trying to get, and what's the reveal and things at the end. So, you know, you always need your Velma to pull off masks and say who's the criminal or whatever at the end. So, you know, it's the same sort of thing, I guess. I've, again, just taken from childhood and moved it to kind of adulthood. And I add a bit of a twist and stuff to my books because, you know, I say psychological thrillers, but most people who've read my books will know that, you know, they're far from just psychological thrillers. I have a bit of an inability to stay within genre boundaries. I kind of skirt back and forth in a kind of a drunken stumble and go into other kind of areas. You know, I'll dip into sci-fi, into horror, there'll be comedy. I'm very much into how characters interact with each other. And that's something, you know, and that probably harks back to my love of things like the young adult books and, you know, even things of coming of age movies and rom-coms and even, you know, things like that. I see there's the relationships in there, and that's what I always like to put into it. And I think that's probably one of the areas that people are often quite surprised at when they read my books. I know someone once said that they thought that I wrote like a female. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad, but I'm going to say it's good, and we'll go from there. But yeah, I like to think that my books are different. Now, whether that's good, I don't know. You have to be the judge of that, and everyone else would. But I would say that there aren't. I've always tried to try and find other authors that are like, that write similarly to myself, but you know, I don't find too many, and I don't know whether that's there's a reason for that, because everyone goes, no, and there's no market for that. Or, you know, whether it is something that's just a little bit different. But I guess time will tell.
I mean, I'd only read one of your books the end of last year, but I saw your name all the time in the groups. So that's why I'm like, I'm really going to have to read one of Jim's books, because, you know, he's been spoken about so much. And yeah, I'm glad I did. So I think it's a good thing that they're different.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, no, definitely.
Much more blood and gore than Scooby-Doo.
Well, that was Little Miss Evil, and that was my first stab at horror. Now, originally, I was going to write horror. That was going to be the genre I was going to go into. You know, I grew up reading, you know, from kind of graduating from the likes of Willard Price and things like that. I was reading, you know, Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Sean Hudson was probably one of the first which really got me into kind of horror. Christopher Fowler, you know, I thought that his dialogue and stuff is brilliant, and he goes across a lot of genres as well. He's actually, I believe it, doing crime books now, which I've not actually read any of those. I've got a couple, but you know, back in the day, it was the horror ones, and you know, even the strange one he did called Calabash, which was the story of a child who kind of goes off into a strange world through isolation himself under the pier at Brighton, and you know, it's all these kind of different things, I guess, which has given me the influence to do kind of different things. But like I said, when I was started writing in the end of the 90s, horror was probably at its peak then. And then it just suddenly crashed, mainly because a lot of things were reclassified from being horror to then being, oh, this is crime, this is a crime thriller. Because it all depended on, is it a person doing murders, or is it a monster, ghoul, supernatural? Is it, you know, aliens? Is it whatever? And so then suddenly the appetite for horror was cut right the way down, and suddenly nobody wanted to touch it at all. So, you know, America, it was still big, but over here it went through a funny little stage. And of course, the likes of, you know, James Patterson, suddenly he became big in about 97, 98 time with the first Alex Cross books. And you know, suddenly everyone was changing. Dean Koontz stopped doing kind of horror for a while. He then jumped on the bandwagon, and you know, he went from doing his long chapters about, you know, how the fluttering of the leaf could go on for about 2 or 3 pages, and you know, where he was really overloading on his creative writing, to suddenly he was doing short, sharp sentences and chapters. And you know, you could tell that he's either been told to do that, or he'd understood that there's the new kind of way of doing things. I mean, as of late, I've noticed he's gone back to what he was doing previously. So yeah, it's just quite interesting, and all those different things, you know, always add up to influence. I mean, the Just South of Heaven book that I was talking about, that was heavily influenced with the likes of Elmore Leonard and Carl Hiaasen, Tim Dorsey, you know, all those that are very kind of caper, kind of comedy, crime, all set in America. And it's, you know, that's where I got the love of dialogue, really. And that's why I love to put a bit of banter into the stories. I have a character called Jez who appears in, I think, about 9 of the 12 books, or 8 of the 12 books, certainly. He's just the comic relief, because I like to do dark side to the stories. You know, I'm very much into that, but I also like a bit of comedy as well. Now, the comedy, therefore, isn't so much slapstick as it's, you know, two guys really winding each other up and doing that, I guess. You know, that's the thing. Jez is just it's a character who is just, he's got a massive heart, and he's very clever with IT and things like that, but he just says what he thinks, and he just has no understanding of when to keep quiet and when not to, and he just doesn't care. But it's a refreshing doesn't care. You know, he wears loud shirts and things like that, or just dress up just for the sake of it, for no apparent reason. And it's just because he just doesn't really care at all. And, you know, when everyone else has their head in their hands going, what are you doing? He's like, what? I wanted to dress up as a cowboy today. What's wrong with that? And, you know, you're off to see the police chief. Why are you dressing up as a cowboy when you've got an important meeting? You know, it's just all funny little things like that, really. Not to mention the fact that he likes to send pictures of his wife to everyone as well, in compromising positions, and he makes out that it's accidental all the time. But, you know, it's just one of these strange things. So that's a kind of an ongoing thing all the way through it. No matter who the person is that he's alongside, there's always something which is slipping out and going a little bit bonkers.
Okay, I'm going to have to read the rest of your books to find this out. And do you get much chance to read now? And if you do, what do you read?
Yeah, so I always try and read every day. I'm a firm believer in, you know, it helps me grow as a writer to read a lot. You know, you have to understand the market, you have to understand other authors. You know, I like to read the authors that I'm friends with, but I also like to read other authors who have the huge deals and stuff, and because you need to understand what, you know, they're being given all these big book deals, they're doing really well, they're selling a lot of books, you know, there must be a reason for that. And, you know, majority of the time that is because there is something different about them. You know, they have hit that mark, and that's just good to understand. But, you know, for no other reason, I enjoy reading, and so it's a nice kind of escapism to go off, and it gives me ideas as well, because I'll start reading a book and I'll try and guess where I think it's going, and if it doesn't go that way, I lock that up as an idea for something else. I do the same with movies as well, so, you know, it's a nice little thing. But yeah, most of those people that I've spoken about, all the people that I read, you know, some of my favorite authors, you know, it's people like Caroline Kempnes, who did You. I like, who else? So a lot of people like that, really, that she's very refreshing in the same way that CJ Skews as well. So it's people that are very, you know, so for a female writer as such, to have protagonists that are very open and using female protagonists that don't care what other people think, slightly brash and slightly on, you know, the side that you wouldn't normally see, because it feels like a lot of the times people water down their protagonists, and so they feel like they're not actually as normal as you think. You know, I see a lot in groups, I'm sure you do as well, where people say, oh, there's too much swearing, or they're too crass, and it's too this and it's too that. But that's life. Life is that. And if you start making everything PG-13, that's not life at all. It's not a great representation of what we do see out there. So there's nothing wrong with a woman being completely open and swearing and saying what she wants. And, you know, that's all the ones I've been around. So why not? So I think that's really refreshing. So I really like that. I think of the Gillian Flynn as well. She's another one that I really like as well. So, you know, those three are very similar in my eyes, albeit they write slightly different. But the way I find their writing is just quite mesmerising, and, you know, it's a dark and slightly different. So really good.
And how do you manage to fit in writing amongst your kids and your day job and reading, and your wife as well? Don't forget her.
I have a superpower. I can put life on hold, and then I can just do what I want for hours on end. No, I pretty much, I get up before 6 a.m, and I start writing just before 7 until 8. Then I start work. So I've got a full-time job as a business analyst, and then when I get to lunch, I do writing, and then I start my job again. See the family for a little while because I'm obligated to do that, And then when they go to bed, depending on whether there's football on, because I can get distracted, and there is a lot of football on at the moment. So I must confess that does sometimes take my priorities somewhat. And then I'll try and write somewhere between 9 and 10, just after 10, and then I sit down and watch telly for about an hour. I'm watching reruns of Jonathan Creek at the moment because it's just great. So and it's slightly less embarrassing than telling people I watch reruns of Dawson's Creek. So that's the way I look at it. So I tend to do that, and then I'll go into and read in bed, and I turn off the light about 12:15 time, and then start again. So I'm getting used to less and less hours sleep till eventually I just won't sleep. That's the plan. I just weaning it out, and I just take some sort of sleep placebo thingy that will just help me. I'll be fine.
Who's your team? Football?
Well, local Swindon, but because obviously they're a few divisions down, everyone in Swindon has a second team because that's just the way we do. So it's Everton is my next team.
Can see you saying it. Well, I follow Luton Town, so just that's really.
That's fair enough.
Although we will be on the BBC playing Chelsea in the FA Cup, so
yeah, we won't.
We will also be on the TV getting absolutely whooped, but there we go.
But it's good though, isn't it? That's the good thing about the cup. It gets you money. It gets just all that sort of thing. I mean, Swindon's struggling with finances as they have been for many years, and at the moment it's just the worst. And we're having teams of lone players constantly, and if they're good, they get called back. If they're no good, they stay, but they're no good. So what's the point? So it's just it's the same for a lot of the lower clubs, pretty much under the Championship. Everyone's in the same boat. It's just a real toss of a coin on survival and what have you. I mean, for my sins, I used to have season tickets for Swindon. So pretty much from about 1986 to about 2003, I went constantly to all the home matches, and I was going to some of the away matches as well. And back in 87, 88, 89, I was playing for the little junior Swindon side as well, and captaining them. So I was massively into all that. But when kids come along, 26, 28, 30 pounds a match, I can't justify going to that. And it's a real shame then, because you move away from your local team to I can name all the Everton squad. I can name the Everton under 23 players, because you see it on the telly. I can see the under 23s on YouTube, all their matches. Swindon matches, I can't afford to go and see. And so, once a year when they're on the telly, that's about as good as you can get. And it's just, which is a shame, but it's money, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And without money, it wouldn't be on the telly. So it's, what can you do?
I mean, do you know Luton's story? Do you know how badly they were treated and how hard they fought to get back to where they are? So I totally understand.
No, exactly, and that is the problem, isn't it? And that's what happens with the lower clubs. They tend to go in quite a lot of waves. You'll have your high, and then it all goes. Then you get back up, and it all goes. And it's because people come in, money comes in, and then money goes. And there's always people that are watching the players and watching everything and scouting them and taking them out. So, and it's frustrating when your best players are taken and they never make it. They don't get anywhere, and you feel sorry for them, but you think if you'd stayed with us, we would have done a bit better. But you can't blame these people. What can you do?
Yeah.
Such is life.
We got deducted those points.
Yeah, it's not ideal, is it? I mean, that makes it challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. But I always think that as a football fan, we have an inherent want to lose, because if your team wins all the time, it becomes boring and monotonous. And the great games are the games where you're not expected to win, and the crowd's up, you're all excited, and it feels like that. And yeah, thankfully we're like that against every team, so that's where the excitement kind of comes in. Never expects to win, but I think there's a core, there's the same as being an England fan, isn't it? There's always massive expectation and massive failure, so it's just the way it is. He wants to win everything.
Maybe once since 1966,
I mean, I remember singing 30 Years of Her, and that was about 30 years ago now. I was singing
like 50 odd years now, isn't it? It's awful. Oh, God.
So
we're favourites for the Euros, or we were last year, so maybe.
I don't know. It's a job to know, really. It's it's the difference between having a group of youngsters who are good, promising, and whether they can actually come together. Because individuals are individuals, and I've played alongside people who, on their own, are fantastic. You watch them in the warm up; they'll be doing flicks and tricks and everything, and then you give them the ball in the match, and they can't run straight, and they trip over, and they spend half the time lit on the floor rolling around, and you're going, "Oh, really?" So I don't know. I based the way I play more on Julian Dix and Stuart Pearce. I was always a boot the ball and boot the player and go with it from there. Yeah, it's all right with skill, but it's better to just run into people. It was a lot more fun.
That's what we used to do when we played hockey at school. We just used to attack the girls' ankles that were horrible to us.
Yeah, no, exactly. I play football like you play rugby. That's the way I look at it.
Would you consider writing in any other genres? I know you've got a couple, but
yeah, possibly, because I like quite, that was the good thing with doing short stories. So the short stories give you the opportunity to have a go at another genre and either tick it off or forget it ever happened. And I did a rom-com in that, which I quite enjoyed doing in the end. I mean, I say a rom-com, I mean, don't be thinking anything that's you'd see on Netflix or anything. This was to do with a sex doll that was found in someone's granddad's attic that they think has come alive. So it's not your normal, if I'm honest. It was never going to be made into a movie that was going to have an Oscar or anything attached to that. More like something the Farrelly brothers would probably come up with, I would think. But it's just something completely different. But again, that let me have a go at that. I did a sci-fi, which was another sci-fi comedy. I was asked to do it in an anthology, and I had absolutely no idea. And I basically I thought of all the Star Wars movies, and I just threw in a load of cliches from that, and just some funny things that would go on, and talking androids that just suddenly go off and do bizarre things, and that sort of thing. And I mean, I'd say I did win that. It probably worked, but whether I'd be able to get away with a second sci-fi is very dubious. I don't think I some people are brilliant at that, and I take my hat off to them. But worlds I don't know and don't understand is just completely, I couldn't even say half the names, let alone remember them. So it was just completely, no, not for me. Likewise with anything that's kind of fantasy, and dragons and those sort of things. Again, it's a complete world that makes no sense to me. So I can't. I don't have to totally relate to things, but I've never seen a dragon. I've never seen a unicorn, as far as I can tell. I mean, I've had a few nights of drinking where I may have, but I'm pretty sure they weren't real. So unless I see photographic evidence to the contrary. So yeah, I like to try and stay in the realms of things that I understand or can question. So all my books have endings that you hopefully don't see coming. Very, very few people have ever seen them coming, which is probably says more about my bizarre mind than anything else. But I like to think that as bizarre and as strange as a lot of the endings can be, I like to think that there's nothing to actually say that they couldn't happen. So that's what, you know, I run the gauntlet of the bizarre sometimes, but you know, like I say, I think there's a distinct possibility, or there's no one's proved otherwise. It's probably a better way of putting it. So I like to ask a question and try and go with it, and you know, I can use the characters to kind of argue the case of both sides of whatever it is I'm trying to do within the stories. And so I've got my Hudson Bell series. So there's book 1 and 2 of that. All the other books are, in theory, standalones, even though Jez does tend to appear in most of them. But they all kind of evolve within and revolve within the same kind of world, if you see what I mean. So it's one of those things like Stephen King does, and you know. So there's often a mention of Thornhill. Now, I grew up in a place called Thornhill, but it was literally a hamlet. It was a hamlet of about 15 houses, predominantly farms, that went on for about 2 miles, 2.5 miles. There was no pubs, no shops or anything. In my books, Thornhill is a pretty big town, so it's completely different. I've literally just taken the name, and I've got kind of where it is, so it's still situated around the same area, which is just outside of Royal Walton Bassett, which is where I kind of grew up in as well. So you have that, and all these other things come off of that. So sometimes it will start in Thornhill, but it will go off to Devon and Cornwall and places like that. My parents moved to Cornwall for about 10 years. And I've always gone on holidays and things down there. Going down right to the bottom, which is where they lived, you know, you can go from coast to coast in, you know, 25, 30 minutes. So it lends itself nicely to have everything you want. Lots of things I like, which are coves and beaches and, you know, fishing villages, woods. It's all, my books aren't often in cities, mainly because I didn't, you know, you can argue that Swindon's as big as a city, but I grew up outside of Swindon, so you know, I'm unfortunately living in it now, or just on the outskirts. So I like to say I'm closer to Cirencester, which is in the Cotswolds, than it is to actual Swindon town. So if you want to try and be a little bit snobbery about it, but you know, I haven't got enough cords to actually go into Cirencester, because you actually have to have mustard-coloured cords and very dapper kind of looking jackets to wear there. So yeah, we try and fit in there, but it doesn't quite work. Try and put on a posh accent and say, you know, I'm a writer, don't you know? Yes. But then I end up at the coffee shop having a vanilla latte, and it kind of all goes downhill from there.
Yeah, yeah, there is a look, isn't there, to that area?
Yeah.
I think you're probably too young as well.
You think so? The kids are making me greyer, so I'm thinking only in a few years, and I'll have the full whiteness going on. So
that's the in thing now. Anyway, the silver
is
fox. It? Yeah.
Oh, that's so, right. I'll go and stop my order for Just for Men then. Go from there.
Yeah, for women not so much. So I went pink to cover my greys. You know, if you're going to do it, you may as well do it, you know, in style, was my theory.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely not a midlife crisis or anything.
I've had midlife crisis since I've been about 18, so I think I'm about my 7th at the moment. And I hope to carry on having them as well until it's not possible anymore.
Yeah, life's too short to, you know, be boring and know what you're doing in life.
Exactly.
So what's the most interesting thing that you found out when you've been researching?
Wow. I mean, my Google history is something to be held, to be honest. Most of it is writing related. Some of it not so much. You know, I do get distracted quite a lot. I used to actually write on a laptop which didn't have the internet on it, and that was brilliant because I didn't get distracted whatsoever. And that was back in the day when phones didn't have the internet on them either. So I was properly in the zone, just cracked on. Now, pinging things here, there, and everywhere, and I look and I think, right, I've been here an hour, written a sentence, excellent. Things are going well. That 5 foot target I had, yeah, that could be challenging. But I have commented on some fluffy bunnies a couple of times, so that's good. Some cat videos.
I know, I'll see that in a minute. Yeah.
So I learned all about silver mining, pirates, and smuggling, and things like that. So yeah, I mean, when I have an idea for a story and I want to go do something that's a little bit different, and I will look into things and research things, and I'm not massively worrying about it as in getting a subject and knuckling down and getting 50 different versions of it so as the integrity of the details is completely there. I'm not that bothered about things. I like to make sure it is as factually accurate as it can be, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. If I was big on the facts and the historical elements, I wouldn't be writing the books I'm writing. I've been doing, more historical books or actual factual non-fiction and probably making a lot more money and selling more books. But I'm not. So, I just do what I sort of do best, which is just randomly throw a load of words at the screen, see where they fall, edit it a lot, delete most of it, start again, and then just kind of go on from there. So yeah, I'm trying to think about other things that I've loads of things. I'm forever got a phone in my hand just quickly googling something, whether it's sometimes I'll do languages, foreign languages, because characters will just bizarrely say things just for the sake of it. Like Jez might come out with something, so I want it to be pretty much correct, but it's okay if it doesn't translate properly, because that's him messing about. So that works out fine. So I can mess about with Google Translate all I want, and it's quite interesting to put something in there and then do it the other way because you realise that it means something completely different. So yeah, it's good to kind of just check these things out once in a while.
Does your wife read your books?
She's read some of them. She's read the first few. She goes in stages of reading. So when she decides that she's going to read, she will finish a book in literally 1 or 2 days, completely focused, and that's it. That's all she'll do. She won't do anything else, and that's it. But she won't read that often. Whereas I'm kind of a more little and often, I suppose. I probably read 50, 60 pages a day, and then I'm just constant along that much, just pretty much forever sort of thing. But yeah, she tends to once in a while.
And does she sleep with one eye open?
She's done that since she met me, to be fair. So that's just part of the course. As of most people are under the same roof as me. You just never know.
And do you want your kids to read your books when they grow up?
Yeah, I think so. They try and read parts of it now, and I have to kind of filter it out a little bit because it's not massively appropriate, any of them. I think my young adult book that I've got Shouldn't be too long before, well, my eldest, who's 13, so she'd be able to read that one okay. That's not too bad at all. And that's kind of led me down to, I've been contemplating recently, and it could be just one of these bizarre ideas that I have, which I have a lot of them, and that's why I've got a little team as well, because they kind of smack me around the head and say, no. But so my middle child, who's 10 and a half, so she's starting to read the point horror books. So I wouldn't mind doing some sort of like small little horror books that are kind of focused towards kind of school, 15 to 18-year-olds, something like that, that kind of area. Kind of a, I guess, a go-between between the likes of point horror and, you know, starting with more adult than Goosebumps, slightly more adult than point horror, but just before you're getting to, I guess, more like the lines of, if you're aware of someone like Christopher Pike, that sort of area. Yeah, so going into your Richard Lehman, but not quite your full, not full Lehman, just half Lehman. So something like that. I wouldn't mind doing that. So, you know, they'd be maybe 140, 150 pages long. Wouldn't necessarily be a series, as in they'd be individual stories, but under the same kind of title and something like that. That's something I wouldn't mind doing. Likewise with the kind of comedy caper type thing, I wouldn't mind doing a whole little series of those. So my book Just South of Heaven, you know, I wanted, that was going to be a whole series. My wonderful American author, publisher rather, they're holding on to those until 2026, so I won't be able to get that one back. Consequently, I'm contracted to not be able to write any more in that series with anyone other than them. So I'm undecided whether I'm going to carry on with that series or not. The follow-up was called Missing Miss Legolas, which is about a one-legged porn star who goes missing. So it's also got a guy who's a clown, but he's retired from the circus probably 15 years ago, but he still dresses as a clown every day, just because that's all he's known. So he carries on doing that. He's got a little sidekick, and I say little because he's a person of small stature, should we say, who used to be part of a double act. There was two of them, which tends to help with the double act because one person in a double act doesn't work. And that was his little brother. So they were Russian midgets or people of smaller stature. But one of them died in a bizarre and, you know, quite a sad egg throwing incident where they used to throw them and catch them in the mouth. But one day, I don't know whether it was the lights from in the crowd, but he just moved slightly and it got stuck in his throat, and he unfortunately died. So his brother Priddy is still around, and so he hangs around with the clown, and they get caught up in this bizarre story of this missing one-legged porn star, and then Guy Caper is the one who's got to try and find out what's going on with them. So yes, all very interesting. And then there's the third book in that, which I haven't. And so that one, Mr. Miss Legolas, I had the whole of the synopsis written for it, so that was all ready to go. And then the third one, I had the title and kind of the start of that, but I hadn't actually kind of got any further with that. So yeah, it's a whole kind of thing that was going on, but I wouldn't mind carrying on doing that because they're a little bit like your kind of 50s kind of detective in how they kind of look at things, speak, and it's that very quick-witted kind of dialogue, but it's contemporary, so it's brought up to date, and it's just so one of my short stories is very much in that vein, and you know, I was only reading that recently and I realized how much I enjoyed writing like that. And it's also it's the type of writing that I don't need to think about at all, because it literally writes itself. So I don't know whether there's a market much for it, but again, it's something else I'd like to do. But unfortunately, I've got loads of things that are coming up, and it's just prioritising it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
If you were transported into any of your books, which would you choose?
Oh, blimey. I don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure whether I'd want to or I wouldn't want to. Yeah, that's a good one. Don't know. I quite like the Just South of Heaven because it is so bizarre with all the characters that are in it, you know, and I think that'll be fun. But there's hitmen and stuff in it, and I'm not sure being surrounded by hitmen is such a good idea. Albeit the main hitman that's in it has narcolepsy, so he'll get someone in his sights and he'll just about to pull the trigger and then he just falls asleep. So when he can stay awake, he's really good, but you know, he just never knows when he's going to and when he's not. So that's the problem. And there's 3 people in there of the official, unofficial Elvis Lives fan club, and they dress as Elvis all the time. So they're all, you know, wandering around dressed as Elvis and just completely bizarre. So yeah, there are just loads of these strange characters in it. So I think that'll probably be the most fun, but I don't know how close to the story I'd want to get, if I'm honest. You'd have to read it and understand the bizarreness of it.
It sounds like fun. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest. I'm sure there's been many. I know I was playing football one time and I was running towards the crowd and part of me came out my shorts. That was pretty embarrassing. Although I'm led to believe that not many people could see anything, so I suppose that was a small thing, as it were. So that wasn't ideal, but I didn't worry too much about it. I just continued straight on and still did a tackle. I didn't bother to mid-run rummage around or anything. I just, you know, stuck to the task, you know, full face on, and it's just, you know, slid straight in. It's probably kids crying and, you know, heads covering out. I'm sure they weren't at all. No one even noticed anything. But, in my mind, everyone was scared. So, you know, that's the way I'm going with it.
Always when I ask men, it's to do with some form of nudity. Very strange.
Who knew, mate?
It's a mystery. And it's a good question I will continue to ask.
Excellent. I'm not sending any pictures, though, for great photographic evidence.
Oh, that's fine. If you were going to have a dinner party and you were going to invite 4 famous people, who would you invite?
Yeah, good question.
I know.
It'll probably be people I won't have to talk to, if I'm honest. So it'll be people that would be chatty, that would crack on. I'd like people like Robin Williams and Jim Carrey, who would be just completely bonkers. And I think the 2 of them together would massively bounce off each other. And so that'd be good to have something like that, because that'd be really entertaining. And I could just fade into the background and just be in stitches for the whole time. And then I don't know. I'd want someone argumentative as well. I think that would be fun. I don't know who though, to be honest. I mean, I guess in a non-comical view, I'd like someone like Peter Betchley would be quite interesting, the writer of Jaws. I just think his knowledge of marine biology and all, you know, all that encompasses what's in the ocean and all the things that he studied, I think would be amazing. You know, that would just be really good. And I guess an author like either Dean Koontz, because of feel I write a little bit more like him in the way he cross genres and things like that. That would be quite good. Although thinking about it, I think I wouldn't mind M. Night Shyamalan, to be honest, the director of The Sixth Sense, because he massively influences my books in how I structure them, how I put little Easter eggs within the books. There are little things that, so some people will read my books twice because it's almost deliberate that they probably won't get it the first time. But if you then know the ending and then you read the book again, you'll see that I've actually fed little details to you. And so, yeah, very much, you know, I just think his movies are fantastic, and the way he writes and the way, you know, the atmospherics, the whole way he twists your mind and leads you deliberately down another path. And that's all the way that I'm trying to do. You know, I'd love to say I was the literary version of M. Night Shyamalan, but I'm not quite sure I could quite get away with that. I might put it on front of my books though, just anyway, because, you know, a lot of people do those things. You know, I'm sure I was, you know, number 9 in a best-selling list once of a list of only 9 actual books. So, you know, I'm sure I'm a bestseller somewhere along the lines there. I was actually an international bestseller once in an anthology. We sold 1 book that day, and it made us an international bestseller. So it's why, you know, that's why I'm a little bit skeptical when I see all tags and stuff like that, because my friends at my previous publisher, they've done recent anthologies, and every single one of them are listed as international bestsellers, and, you know, all this. And you know, the truth of the matter is, you can be an international bestseller or a bestseller if what you're looking at is the very cut down categories right down to the bottom. So, you know, you can be a bestseller in crime that's in Swindon with a guy called Jez. You know, that is the most best-selling of that week or month or probably ever. But, you know, the ones where for the whole Kindle bestseller, those are the ones that I'll take note of. You know, not to say I won't pat myself on the back if I get one of these, but you know, within the top 100, even if when you look at the actual Kindle sales, it's like 23,000 and something like that. I mean, that's a little bit more of a gauge, I find. But, you know, fair play. Some people like to, you know, motivate themselves with these things, and I think that's great. Good for them.
Yeah. Do you get much feedback from your readers apart from your beta readers?
I wouldn't say I get loads of feedback. You know, other, you know, so people will sometimes people will comment on the endings because I have, you know, unexpected endings. Sometimes people really don't like them. So my book, The Place That Never Existed, I mean, that's 50-50 on that. The amount of reviews I've got that say 98% of the book was fantastic, rubbish ending. Sorry about that. But that's, you know, it's just the way it is. You know, I could try and write books that pleased people. I could write books of endings that people wanted. I've tried writing books that don't have a twist at all. You know, Little Miss Evil wasn't meant to have a twist at all. Little Miss Evil was actually meant to be a novella. It was meant to be about 140 pages, short novella. It was a stopgap between books. It was a stopgap between the Hudson Bell series and the book I'm writing at the moment, The Crazy Season. And it was just something to do, you know, throw it out there, see how it goes. 140 pages, went into a full novel. Feedback was so good on the novel from beta readers and the initial ARC readers that it then turned into a trilogy. So I'll be doing book 2 and book 3 of that. I enjoyed writing it more than I thought I'd enjoy writing it. It turned out a lot better. I almost half-heartedly wrote it to start with, and I think that's the funny thing about it. But I think that's probably how I write better, is by not thinking too much about it. So, like I say, my books have, endings you don't see, that are twists and whatever. I never know what those twists are until probably 3/4 of the way through the book. And I never worry about it whatsoever, because I know at some point when I'm doing something bizarre, I don't know, counting Rice Krispies or something like that, the sort of thing that we all do, it will just pop into my head and I'll go, oh, wow, do you know what? That's really good. So, yeah. And, I just crack on there. Because let's face it, it takes 3 or 4 months for me to write a book. That's a long time. That's a lot of hours. That's a lot of nights. It's a lot of counting Rice Krispies, if I'm honest. So somewhere along the line, something will pop into my head. So, I just don't worry about it. And when I get to the stage of getting near the end of a book and I'm going, well, you know what, nothing's happened here. So, yeah, then I might start worrying about these things. But no, I just kind of crack on from there. So, yeah, it's the way it is.
Well, I think that's all the questions I have for you today, unless there's anything else you want to tell us about that I haven't asked you.
I don't think so. So I'll just say I'm writing a book at the moment called The Crazy Season. This was meant to be a standalone. It's not anymore. Because, as I say, when I start writing, I have a very vague idea of what I'm going to do with the book. I'll start writing it. And I don't know whether it's the feedback of how well the Hudson Vale series has been received by readers and by people, but yeah, it feels so much better to write a series as well as standalone. I couldn't give up on standalone because they are the ability for me to just write whatever I want and not worry too much. A series is a completely different mindset. You need a good memory, which is something I don't have. And I don't write things down either, which means it's a lot of time for me flicking back through books. Sometimes I actually ask readers some of the details from my own books because they tend to know them more than I do. Recently, I re-released A Cold Retreat, so I had to reread it again to re-edit it, just to tweak it up, polish it, and what have you. And I completely forgot one of the twists, and it was like I read it for the first time and I thought, that's pretty good. I like that. And it's just, I mean, my kids laugh because we watch movies again and I can't remember what's going on. I mean, I sat and watched, I know what you did last summer with my eldest. And on one scene, she said, oh, what happens here? I bet it's so-and-so, I bet it's this and that. What is it? What is that? And I said, no idea. Can't remember. I've seen the movie 4 times, but I can't remember.
I'm the same.
But, I assume I'm only going to get worse. So what I'm doing now is I'm writing down my best movies, my best music, and best books, so that when I cannot remember anything, then I can just look at this list and then I'll know that I'll enjoy them. So then I'll reread, rewatch, re-listen over and over again. So I've got a little pack ready for when I've just completely lost it. That's the plan.
Good to plan ahead.
I think so. Yeah. I couldn't bury it though, because I wouldn't remember where it was buried. So
as long as you don't put it in a safe place in your house and forget where that is as well.
No, exactly. So yeah, that book. So that's Crazy Season. I have changed the story quite a lot because, like I say, it was a standalone, and the main character was going to die at the end, and it was all completely. As I'm not a writer, I can say it now. It was going to be a little bit like the Jim Carrey movie Number 23, where he's looking for the author of this book for the whole time, and then he finds out that it's him that's written it. So it's a similar type of thing, except he was being abducted by aliens. So standard normal things that happen in our lives. So this was the whole thing. It was a guy who was convinced he was being abducted by aliens, and he was sending the main guy these emails the whole time. and the whole thing is him trying to find out who this guy is, and then in the end he finds out it's him. But now I've completely changed it, so it's not that at all. So you can just forget that. So if you thought that was a really good idea, right, that's not happening. So sorry about that. I'll do it in another book. I changed the names, see, and it won't be abduction, it'll be something else. See? But now it's a series, and it's a cross between X-Files and Jonathan Creek, hence my Jonathan Creek marathon that I'm going through at the moment. So the idea is it's an investigative journalist, and he basically goes and investigates all these strange happenings that are going on, and he just uncovers hoaxes left, right, and centre. That's the main thing. He's a complete skeptic. He thinks this is all made up. It's all rubbish, and so that's the whole basis of the story, until he gets caught up in a story that he can't get to the bottom of, or doesn't think he can get to the bottom of. There's the slight negative and slightly downbeat part of the book, which is near the beginning. There's a car crash after he's had an award, and his wife is in a coma and his daughter dies. We start a year on and his wife's still in a coma. So he goes back and forth to the hospital every day to see her. So it's his relationship with his wife who's in a coma, and he talks things through with her. And there's another nurse that's there that helps him through that as well. So there's that very human side of what he's going through. And hence, when he's going off to try and investigate things, he doesn't want to be away for more than a day, because he always wants to be back just in case something happens to his wife and he never gets to say anything. So there's that part, along with a bit of comedy, with a bit of horror, with a bit of, this whole mixture. So it's turned into quite a fun book. And hopefully it'll be well received as well as the Hudson Bell series. Yeah, and that's about it.
So before we go, do you just want to tell people where they can find out more about you and your book?
Yeah, so all my books are on Amazon. They're all on Kindle Unlimited as well. All the ones that I've re-released and self-published. You can still get the 4 that are with my publisher, and they'll be only too pleased for you to buy them. If at all they ever decide to give me any royalties for them, that will be a bonus. That'll be really nice. I won't hold my breath on that. They've not spoken to me since about last February. I'm sure there's just miscommunication somewhere along the line, or the fact that they don't seem to respond to me anymore. But who knew? Life's full of ups and downs, and things that don't kill you make you stronger, and all that. So I wish them all the best, and I hope they enjoy my books.